The pandemic of 2020 led to an extended lockdown, and as a result here in 2021, there are a huge number of people who have changed jobs or returned to school to train for a new career. What are we seeing, and how do you reinvent yourself? Scott Terrio is back, and we discuss it starting right now.
This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Everyone knows what's happening. The virus hit in March 2020 and businesses closed and lots of people were thrown out of work. And even when the economy is fully reopened, we'll never be back to normal. Some jobs have changed permanently or completely disappeared. Today, we aren't going to focus on the numbers. We're going to talk about people. How is this impacting real people? To discuss it, Scott Terrio is here, the manager of consumer insolvency here at Hoyes Michaelis. Scott, welcome back. Are you ready to talk about people?
Ready to talk about people and anything else, Doug.
Excellent. I sort of butchered your name in the intro there. So
That's okay.
Scott Terrio. It's a very hard name, but I managed to nail it.
It's spelled wrong too, really.
There you go.
It's supposed to be French and much more exotic sounding than that. So
well, we'll take what we can get. So you and I, obviously, as I think everyone is aware, work at our office in downtown Toronto, Yonge and King. And by my notes, the last time we were there, right in the heart of the financial district, was the day before the lockdown, March 17th, 2020, I think is
one week from today, it'll be a year. That's right.
There you go. So it's been a long time. Of course, we're airing this, at the end of March, so it's been slightly more than a year. So first question, what are you seeing? What has changed in the last year? What are you seeing right now?
Right. Well, we came home to work from home on March 18th last year, and that was basically right in the middle of the start of the shutdown. And what we had early on observed was, probably I was getting 10, 12, 13, 14 calls a day, which is a lot. But people were panicked. Normally when people call us, they're very calm because they've spent a lot of time agonizing and thinking about their situation before they actually call us. And these people were freaked out because they were all losing their jobs suddenly. And that obviously changes the tone and the nature of the conversations and how people are reacting. That settled over a while. By summer, it was more back to calm people who had thought about things for a while. Maybe they'd been off their jobs 2-3 months, had more indication of what the future was going to look like, et cetera. And then into the fall and now and back into the winter again, much more normal type of calls without people being panicked. But the biggest thing that we've seen is the massive uptick in people calling us from certain industries, the ones that were really blown away by COVID, any kind of food service, restaurants, anybody who does entertainment, actors, anybody who is in physical contact with people as the nature of their work, like chiropractors, physiotherapists, trainers at gyms. We had calls from pilots because the airline industries were shut down and flight attendants. So there was a definite demographic that was noticeable in our work, and that has continued, although it's probably tapered off a bit. But some of those people are now calling us back again because the initial panic is gone. That's several months in the past. And now they've kind of decided either they're going to do something else or they're in some other way ready to roll with proceeding with some kind of a proposal or bankruptcy.
So what are the implications of all that then? And you're right, there was kind of the first wave, and then in the summer of 2020, things looked like, maybe it's going to get a little bit back to normal. And then, of course, we went back into shutdown mode in the fall. And here we are in the spring of 2021, and we are gradually emerging, but we're nowhere near yet. So what do you see as the implications of all of that?
Yeah, well, the world has changed, right? And so I think if the shutdown had been 3 months or 4 months, it would have been a different story, but it's a year. And that's a heck of a long time for people who, don't have savings set aside like Canadians were notorious for before this started. That's changed now a bit because of the benefits and whatever. But if you don't have any money aside that you can tap in order to ride something out, it's a lot tougher going 12 months than, just a few months. So now I think what we're seeing is we're seeing those people decide, okay, what am I going to do here? Do I want to just get out of this industry because if we're going to keep seeing variants come back with this thing, if this is our near future, I can't live like this. And so people are looking to reinvent themselves, is a lot of what we've seen.
Yeah, and that's what we want to talk about today. So, and you're right. I mean, the office workers are all working from home, or a lot of them.
Yeah.
And as a result, well, you and I have done it. You walk through the path in downtown Toronto and it's deserted. All of the coffee shops and dry cleaners and little grocery stores and places you can get your hair blow dried. I don't even know what that is, but
yeah, like I've been down to the office a couple of times, a few times, just to do various things, whatever, and it is deserted. Like the downtown is frighteningly empty. And when I took a stroll through, kind of a nosy way in the path system, all of those businesses are utterly reliant on foot traffic. That's the only reason they're there. And there is a shocking number of them. I mean, when you're not there and you think about all the places that you used to kind of just pop into, those people can't fake a living, right? They have to be there. And the people in the towers have to be there. And none of them are. And so, and I don't know when we're talking about vaccinations sometime in September, I think. Well, even if it's summer, you're going 15 months until any kind of semblance of normal returns. And I don't even think it's going to, it's not going to go back to 100%.
Well, I think you're exactly right. And the stats I've seen say that up to 75% of a typical office worker's job can be done just as efficiently remotely. I mean, if you're talking on a phone, working on a computer, well, you can do that pretty much anywhere. 25% of the job is more efficient in person, apparently, so say the experts. And things like, onboarding new employees. Onboarding, that's a new word that we didn't have 20 years ago. It just means hiring a new person and bringing them up to speed.
Yeah, I had to play dumb on that one with a couple of clients about a year ago, and now I figured it out.
Yeah, so onboarding, that's the new word.
Yeah, I just made like I knew.
Yeah, I know what that is, sure. But, training, mentoring, in-person meetings, obviously client meetings are something that has to be done in person. So what that tells me is that many employers are going to make permanent changes. You think of the big law firms, and there's tons of them in downtown Toronto. They got, 10 floors in the big skyscraper. Well, if people are going to be working from home more, maybe they only need 5 floors, and maybe some of those floors get converted into meeting rooms and training areas and so on, which means fewer people downtown. So therefore, fewer people who are going to the coffee shops and any other industry that has all these support things. So how then do how do people reinvent themselves? So let's say I was the guy who worked in the coffee shop, or some in-person job that is no longer going to be there. What are you seeing? How are people reinventing themselves?
Well, pretty creatively, I think, and pretty open-mindedly is also my take. We've met with an awful lot of these people, and so we're getting their stories in depth. And you mentioned the law clerks. Well, I've met with several law clerks from these downtown offices, the big 6 law firms, or whatever, the lesser big 12. And they have multiple floors. Places are massive. They've got 30 or 40 lawyers and then all the support staff. And so I think a lot of those people are saying, well, I'm good at something, but maybe I reinvent myself to market my own skills. And I think the demographics have lent itself to this, in the sense that younger people have gotten crushed a lot more than older people in this thing, because of the service economy is usually people in their 20s and 30s. And those people, frankly, as millennials, are also already used to the gig economy. And so maybe they weren't doing it, but their friends were, 2-3 jobs at a time, juggling things, and even kind of working for yourself. So there's already an entrepreneurial mindset. And I think you're going to see a huge explosion in people just deciding to work for themselves. And because going online, the cost barrier or entry barrier for cost is very low. And, if you happen to be computer savvy, which most of those people are anyways, it doesn't take much to go and set yourself up to do something you're good at without going to the old firm, right?
So give me a tangible example or two of what you are seeing. And we're not going to be disclosing clients' names and addresses and everything here, but in generic terms, what kind of jobs were they working in, and what kind of things are they going to morph into?
Yeah, well, so for example, actors and entertainers, awful lot of those have come to us, and some of them have just decided, you know what, my industry's never really coming back the way it was, or else they're going to have to let a lot of people go in order to ride out a few years worth of regaining revenues. And so they've gone online and marketed themselves as voiceover experts, because you can do that with a good sound system at home, right? They've gone and they've shifted into, things like, voicing commercials, maybe some, one of them even went to work for a big bank where they wanted a voice, and he just thought, oh, what are the odds of this? So I think people are realizing, well, here are my skills. Forget about the work, right? But here's what I'm actually good at. And so back up, take a step back and sort of first principles. And so, am I good at, running a busy restaurant and being the front manager? And like that takes a lot of chaos management, right? And so starting to think of, well, what are the other chaos businesses that aren't food related and aren't at the behest of everything running all the time without shutdowns, right? And so, I think a lot of people would value somebody who can keep their head when everybody else is losing theirs, right?
Yeah, that's a critical point, I think, that we have to look at ourselves not as, I work in a restaurant, but my
not job title,
right?
But what is the skill? Why were you there?
Yeah,
right.
What is the skill? And your comment about actresses and actors and performers and that is a very good one, because yes, you and I have dealt with a lot of people. Mm-hmm. Toronto is a big area for that. And I know that a lot of them now, I guess all of them, are doing auditions over Zoom, just like we're doing them now. A lot of them have set up little mini studios in their apartment so that they can, maybe they've got a green screen, they've got, props, they can, change their hair color, whatever they need to do, just like going to an audition.
And you can do that anywhere. Yep. Like, why can't you go for a role in LA? Well, before in Toronto, well, you'd have to go to LA, right? Well, now people are realizing they don't need to do that. Now, if I get the gig, I'm going to LA. Yeah, but I can audition for it here. It's a lot broader canvas for a lot of people, right? Like, I think people are realizing, I can get out to way more people now that everybody's used to Zoom, right? And everybody's used to doing everything online, and, it's more efficient. And yeah, okay, so maybe you have to move once you land the job or the role or whatever, that's fine. But at least you're not limited by travel ahead of time necessarily now, right? There's a lot, you're open to a lot more people, jobs, opportunities now than we realized before.
Yeah, and that's both good and bad, because I'm also now competing with people from all around the world too. So it's a two-edged sword. So
it is.
I mean, I was reading a recent report by McKinsey, and they say remote work and virtual meetings are likely to continue. Okay, duh. Yeah. I mean, in your prior life, and we won't tell people what you used to do, because, it was, we don't want to mention the tractor company you used to work for, but you were traveling all over the place.
Yep.
Well, now if I need to make a sales call on that guy in Iowa, I get on Zoom, I spend an hour with him rather than 3 days, on a plane back and forth. So I think that's obviously anything to do with travel is going to be impacted.
For sure.
I think they're also saying in their study that COVID-19 may propel faster adoption of automation and AI. Well, duh. I think that's kind of a no-brainer. Anything that has to do with high physical proximity. So warehouse jobs, grocery stores, call centers, manufacturing plants. And I'm pretty sure in the fancy Amazon warehouses, they've already got robots going up and down the aisle. Obviously, there's a lot of people there as well. Jobs in warehousing and transportation may increase as a result in the growth of e-commerce and the delivery economy. And that will have a bit of a disruption on low income or low wage jobs as well. So, food service, typically, like you said, is a younger person, lower type wage job. Well, if the robot's making the hamburgers, that's going to have some kind of impact. And then back to your point, employers can now hire from anywhere. Yeah. So if you are a knowledge worker, well, you're going to have skills better than whoever you're competing with.
Yeah, for sure. And like going back to the Amazon example too, I've had a few pilots in the last 12 months because, either who were already in a proposal and had to adjust it or amend it because they haven't flown anywhere for 8 months, and not the foreseeable future is shrinking. But one of them is looking at flying cargo. So instead of flying humans, now he's got to switch unions and stuff, okay, because there's all the union entanglements with those things. But some of them are saying, well, you know what? There's going to be packages flying everywhere all the time, forever from now on, right? Like, when is that ever going to stop? And so, to have steady employment where they're not just getting their flight pay and their per diems and all that stuff, which is a significant amount of the money and income that pilots make, for example, just fly boxes. So I've had one guy that's had a good long think about that, and he's going for that. He wants to keep being a pilot, but you know what? I'm not going to fly people anymore.
Yeah, and I talked to one guy, same thing. He's a pilot. One of his buddies is a pilot, and he said, yeah, he's actually making more money now doing the cargo thing because it's go, go, go. You're doing the overnight shift and so on. So, let's go back to this whole reinventing thing then. And so people are saying, okay, my job is probably gone forever. That restaurant that I worked at for 30 years isn't reopening. I don't really want to be in that industry anymore. Yeah. So how do you actually go through that thought process? And you've been through this because, as I said, you did something else before you became the manager of consumer insolvency here at Hoyes Michaelis.
Yeah.
Tell me the thought process. How does it work?
Well, I think in this case, different to my own, I think people have been forced to think. Like, if you're off work for 6, 8, 10, 12 months, that's a long time. And when you can't go out. And so people have been thinking and brooding, and I think you rarely get a chance in your life to really rethink things. And people are seeing this just as a reshift generally. And so I've had a DJ who used to do events. Well, he's done nothing, and the foreseeable future isn't great either. So what he did is he thought, I'm great at this. And so he ended up getting a job at a bank where he basically invented the job. He went to the HR person and said, look, you guys need somebody to handle all your sound systems and whatever. So he's now the guy at the bank who makes sure that the sound quality, the video quality, all that stuff of all their countless meetings and everything is smooth and is nice. And they saw value in that. So I think he had a chance to sit back and go, okay, I don't necessarily need to leave the sound technology business. But now if the events come back, he can still do those on the weekends, but he's got a job. So he realized, hey man, I've got a skill here, and I can market this to big companies because they need people to know what they're doing, and so that's I think a really good example of somebody using the time to their advantage to just redirect their life and to employ their skills somewhere where they could be of value. And then if they want to keep doing their old job in the future on the weekends, he could actually make really good money with the two of them.
Yeah, and so you hit on a couple of really good points there. The first one is he doesn't think of himself as a DJ. He thinks of himself as somebody who has these skills. I know how to work the soundboard. I know how to do this. I know how to do that. So where else can I use that? And you're right. Everybody is doing Zoom meetings. Podcasts now are being recorded, over Zoom. We're not in the same room. We're not in the same city at the moment as we're doing this. So those skills can be transferred as well. And the other key point you made is using time to their advantage. So, okay, we've been in lockdown for a year, and there will be many people who will still be collecting EI or CRB or whatever, perhaps till the end of the summer. Okay, what are you doing with that time? Are you upgrading your skills? Are you learning new stuff? I think that's critical as well now, too.
And sometimes you need to speak to other people, because you can't see the forest for the trees for your own situation. And so I was meeting with a chef of ours who, obviously was on CERB for months, and she was getting depressed. And, when is the restaurant industry coming back? And I said to her, well, you're good at making food, right? And all we keep hearing is the wealth gap has increased because of COVID. So the wealthy people in Toronto are just richer because, they were already rich, and this has just made them richer because they have a lot of stocks, and their money is not from jobs. It's from investments and owning things. So she went and volunteered her time at a group of rich people, let's just say. I don't know what group it was, and I wouldn't name it if I did. But she ended up being a private chef for 2 or 3 wealthy families in Toronto because they had been to her restaurant and knew her food. And they're even more loaded now than they were before. And she actually got hired as a chef for those people. And it's way less stress because she's just making meals for a family, right? She's making great money and she's not working stupid hours. So this was another really good example I thought of, someone who just thought, here's what I'm great at. Here's the contacts I have, and using the network that I've had in my past to get a new job, essentially.
Well, and if you think about it from the point of view of a super wealthy, rich person, which I'm not and you're not, but okay, I'm used to going out to the restaurant and it costs, $200 for dinner.
Yeah.
Well, how much would it cost to have the chef come to my house and prepare that same dinner? I don't know, maybe $200 because there's no overhead from the restaurant or anything.
And even if it's a short-term thing, like during COVID, well, then they got the idea of like, maybe we just hire this person, and then a friend of hers was also in the same situation. And then, so getting out to the people and networking is critical here, right? Because so you got to be able to, somebody that can kind of market yourself. But, you already have a lot of the contacts at your disposal from your old work. And you know what? People are thinking outside the box. Even people who weren't negatively affected by COVID, like the rich people who got richer, are thinking, like you just said, Doug, like, maybe I just have this person cook for me.
Yep. And the networking is absolutely key.
It is.
Advice that I give to everybody is, okay, so you want to reinvent yourself and you want to go into that new line of work. How do you figure out what's going on in that new line of work? Well, at the very basic, I would say, well, make sure you join that LinkedIn group that talks about that. Join the Facebook group, join the organization, start subscribing to the magazine, join the Reddit community, whatever it is. Because again, electronically, you can do all that stuff now. You don't have to go to the meetings every second Tuesday.
Yeah, the world has shrunk so much with that kind of thing that, I wish 25 years ago I'd had LinkedIn and other things. I mean, all the things you could have done and all the places you could have reached are, really unlimited. And, yes, we have the people who have completely gone into a different field. So I have the car salespeople and I have, law clerks and who have decided to just go into, I don't know, biotech. Or we had the fellow we spoke to, the server, who decided to be a software engineer. Well, his trick was he was already studying software stuff because that was what he really loved. He was only in the server and sommelier business because it paid the bills. So maybe now's the time to throw the switch and just get into that other industry. And that's what he did, right? And so there are people who are completely reinventing themselves. Now you got to be able to do that. That's a lot more of a challenge because you still got to pay the bills, put food on the table, and that kind of stuff. But yeah, there are ways to go and completely reinvent yourself. I even had an example of a guy who was, he was a luxury accessories salesperson. So essentially selling, massively expensive handbags to rich people, right? And so you get a following when you do that. Like there's only so many people that go and buy $25,000 handbags, I'm told. And so he became a professional shopper for 10 or 12 rich families. He's just going to go shop for them now. And that's not just, until COVID restrictions lift, but that was something that he just thought of. He's like, all my clients, know I'm good at this stuff, and I always suit them up and, get them set. So really thinking outside the box type of stuff.
That's an excellent idea, because here I am like a fool going out and buying my own $25,000 handbags. I could have somebody else doing that for me. So that's
it's not like you're trying them on.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. You probably have to make sure they match.
It was a real thing. And I've even had, a tattoo artist. So, his industry was crushed, obviously, right? But he's a drawer. He's an artist. And so he decided to do illustrating work for people. And he got in touch with some publishers and things like that. And he kind of knew the downtown crowd or whatever. It was networking again. But what he's really good at is art. And yeah, he does tattoos, and he probably will still do that when it comes back, because I think people are going to go nuts with the ink once they can get out again. But he's essentially got himself another gig as an illustrator.
Yep. Yeah, and I can think of at least a couple of clients of mine as well, exactly the same thing, very
Yep.
good at art. They are currently either getting EI or working at, ordinary type jobs, but they are building their talent stack, as Scott Adams would call it, so that they are ready to do that. They're starting a YouTube channel, an Instagram channel. They're starting a podcast, whatever, to get the word out. So, okay, so let's finish up then with practical advice here. So what is your practical advice for somebody who wants to reinvent themselves, either out of necessity or because, hey, now is the time, I've got the opportunity? How would you go about doing that? What's your thought process? Where would you start?
Well, so I would start with making, notes about what you're good at, really actually good at. Like what's the basis of what you've been doing in the past, not the job title, but what you, and then make notes about what you like. So we've had a lot of people whose passions were put aside to pay the bills. They're like the guy with, the server that decided to become the software engineer. So don't abandon those. And maybe this is the time, right? Like, when are you going to get a big, widespread international reset like this again? Probably never, hopefully never. But now you've got time on your side. And if you can study and before you jump ship, so in other words, don't quit your job and then go, hey, what am I going to do? Obviously, get your skill sets together, volunteer, network, build up a portfolio if you need to, if it's that kind of business before you jump ship, and then you go once you're prepared. I will mention debt, because this is debt free.
Yes, let's talk about debt. How do I do all this reinventing without getting into a lot of debt?
So my advice, because of all the people that we've met with since this started, take a look at your finances, okay? Because nothing would be worse than shifting into something and being financially crushed. So I think you take stock of where you're at in terms of your personal debt. A lot of people have run up personal debt, the people we've been talking about here, right? I mean, most of them have tapped credit because they've had to, right? Like CERB wasn't enough. And I mean, so first take stock of your debt, because it's much easier you should talk to a debt professional before you do anything, because it's much easier to avoid financial trouble than it is to extricate someone from it. Okay. And so we can always get you out of it, but it's way easier to get you out of it if you don't do something you shouldn't do. And most people make a bad move just because nobody's taught them what not to do with taxes owing or with setting up a company. A lot of these people who are going entrepreneur now as a result of this shift in careers, talk to somebody that knows what they're doing about, do I set up a corporation? Do I keep it as a sole proprietorship? What are the implications of those? Because a lot of people that you and I talk to who are small business owners are really good at what they do, but they're really, really bad at all the admin and the taxes and stuff. And that's how they get in trouble. It's not because they were not good at what they did. It's just because of the setup and the financial. And nobody teaches you that stuff. And you should talk to a professional before you make a jump, because you can really get into a bad way just by making a bad move.
Yep, I totally agree. And things like, well, I might as well cash in my RSP to fund this new business or to keep paying off my debt or something. Yeah, okay, that's something you want to get a bit of advice on before you.
Yeah, exactly. Like I just think that people who don't talk to professionals when they set something up are minimizing their success as opposed to maximizing it. And I think it doesn't take very many conversations with somebody who knows what they're doing to get some really good maximizing advice and minimizing your potential trouble down the road. And most of the people that we've met with who are small business owners, really that's what happened, is the admin and the taxes and all that stuff got away from them, or they had bad advice, from the setup of the thing. They shouldn't have done this, shouldn't have done that. So I think you really want to talk to some people that know what they're doing about money, finance, debt, and before you move on.
Yep, I totally agree. That is an excellent way to end it, and we will be discussing this, I'm sure, many times again in the future. Scott, thanks very much for being here.
Thank you, Doug.
That was Scott Terrio, the manager of consumer insolvency here at Hoyes Michaelis. And what is your Twitter handle there, Scott? He doesn't even know. Scott Terrio HMA, I think. I think
Yeah,
that's
Scott Terrio HMA. I had to think about
There
that.
you
I'm
go.
glad you knew that.
All you do is, so Scott Terrio, Terrio HMA, if you want to follow along. He's got lots of stuff on there. He talks sometimes about soccer, which I don't know anything about, but all the rest of the stuff is fantastic. So football, I guess is what you call it.
Yeah.
There you go. So that is our show for today, and I think we hit on a huge number of really important topics. And when it comes to reinventing yourself, look for ways to reinvent yourself without taking on debt. Start small, do a side hustle, something that doesn't cost too much, volunteer, look for financial support, student loans, other programs, whatever, and try not to get into a huge amount of debt to do it. And my advice is we definitely have to accept the fact that the world has changed. There will be more people working remotely. We're going to continue to order stuff online, so we may not go to stores as often. Automation is increasing. Artificial intelligence will replace many jobs. That's just the way it is, but it will create new ones. Change is accelerating, so it's prudent to consider whether or not you have a future in your current career, and if not, well, start looking for ways to reinvent yourself. The sooner you start, the sooner you can get where you want to go, and try to avoid debt while you're doing it. That's our show for today. Thanks for liking and subscribing, and thanks for listening. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.